Taehyung witnesses Jungkook's intimate embrace with Jeon and vows never to forgive him. Jealousy ignites a storm more painful than 1,000 stabs. "Don't touch him like that again." Taehyung's voice trembled, barely louder than a whisper, but it cut through the midnight air like shattered glass. The rooftop was silent, save for the hum of the city far below and the wind hissing through the railings. Neon lights from billboards painted the scene in hues of cold blue and angry red. Taehyung stood frozen at the stairwell entrance, his fists clenched, breath held hostage by the sight before him. Jungkook, bare-chested, his skin glowing faintly under the moonlight, held Jeon in a tight embrace. It wasn't just a hug. It was desperate, intimate, as though letting go would shatter them both into pieces too small to gather. Taehyung's pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out every rational thought. The silence stretched too long. Jeon didn't notice him. His face was buried in Jungkook's neck, body trembling. But Jungkook did. His eyes locked with Taehyung's. They didn't widen in guilt. They didn't flinch. They dared him to ask. The fury came later. First came the numbness, like someone had poured ice down Taehyung's spine. His mind scrambled, trying to find footing. Why Jeon? Why now? They were supposed to be brothers. No secrets. No hidden tenderness passed like forbidden letters in the dark. He turned before his rage betrayed him further, stalking back into the stairwell. The steel door slammed shut behind him with a finality that felt like the closing of a coffin. The apartment was too quiet, too neat. It mocked the chaos storming inside his chest. Taehyung collapsed onto the couch, not caring that his coat tangled awkwardly beneath him. His throat burned with unsaid words. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Jungkook, it's not what you think. Taehyung stared at the message, then deleted it. It was what he thought. He'd seen it. The way Jungkook's arms tightened around Jeon like a lifeline. Like Jeon was someone he could lose. And the worst part? Jeon let him, welcomed it, sank into it. That embrace, it wasn't brotherly. It wasn't platonic. It was sacred. A betrayal dressed in tenderness. Taehyung pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes until he saw stars. His breath came in short, bitter gasps. They hadn't even noticed him. He had stood there, invisible in the dark, like a ghost haunting his own life. He remembered Jin's voice from weeks ago, calm and distant. People grieve differently, Tae. Don't judge what you don't understand. Grieve? That excuse again. Everyone had changed after Sukmin's disappearance. But this was different. It was more than grief. It was obsession. Secrets wrapped in silk, too smooth to catch but sharp enough to cut. He got up, suddenly suffocating. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. He grabbed his keys and left without locking the door. In a convenience store on the edge of Mapo, Taehyung stared blankly at a row of ramen packets. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him like insects. An old song played on the radio, something soft and sorrowful that only made things worse. A little boy cried near the counter, clutching a fallen popsicle. His mother knelt beside him, whispering soft apologies. Taehyung turned away. He walked out without buying anything. The cold outside slapped his face, grounding him. He walked for hours, past the Han River, through alleys slick with rain, under street lamps that flickered like dying fireflies. By the time he returned, the apartment was dark, but not empty. Jungkook sat on the floor near the window, still shirtless, his eyes shadowed with something unreadable. Between them, silence pooled like oil, dense, toxic, flammable. You saw? Jungkook said simply. Taehyung didn't answer. I wasn't hiding it, he added. Taehyung finally looked at him. Really looked. Then why did it feel like a knife to the chest? Jungkook didn't move. Because you still don't understand. I understand betrayal. Taehyung's voice cracked. And that wasn't grief, Jungkook. That was you choosing him. Over me. Something flickered in Jungkook's expression. Regret? Pity? Neither would save him. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jungkook said. Good. Taehyung stepped forward, his voice like broken glass. Because I swear to every star that ever watched over us. I'll never forgive you. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded thing. Inside, Taehyung's heart fractured with a finality that felt biblical. And somewhere in the city, Jeon stood at a window, watching the moon vanish behind clouds. He held a letter in his hand, unread, unopened. The ink had long since dried, but its words still echoed, just like the promise Taehyung had made. Not of forgiveness, but of never forgetting. You lied to me. Taehyung's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unsent messages. 1,000 nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if he was the only one drowning. The apartment smelled like rain and betrayal. Jungkook stood with his back to him, motionless, as if the act of turning around would confirm what they both already knew. No, Jungkook said after a long pause. I just didn't tell you everything. Taehyung stepped closer. The floor creaked beneath his bare feet, each step cracking the brittle silence between them. Same thing. Jungkook finally turned. His face was unreadable, eyes shadowed with fatigue, jaw clenched so tight it could snap. It wasn't meant to hurt you. You wrapped your arms around him like he was the only thing keeping you from falling apart. And you did it where anyone could see. Where I could see. It wasn't like that, Jungkook snapped, his voice rising. I needed you too, Taehyung roared, chest heaving. The sheer volume of his own voice startled him. But I never got that version of you. I got the ghost, the silence, the locked doors and forced smiles. Jungkook flinched. The storm outside picked up, thunder rolling in the distance. The windows rattled. Neither of them moved. Taehyung exhaled slowly, his voice dropping to a jagged whisper. I thought we were brothers. We are, Jungkook said. No. Taehyung shook his head. Brothers don't hide whatever that was. That was more than comfort, more than grief. That was you choosing him in a way you never chose me. Jungkook looked away, jaw flexing. You don't know what I've been dealing with. Then tell me, Taehyung begged. Don't shut me out. Don't pretend I don't exist when it's inconvenient for your secrets. There was a long silence. Then Jungkook whispered, I see Sukmin in my dreams. Every night. Taehyung blinked. What? Sometimes he's drowning. Sometimes he's screaming my name. Sometimes he just stands there, watching. Jungkook's hands trembled. Jin's the only one who understands. He sees him too. Taehyung's blood ran cold. What are you saying? We never stopped looking for him, Jungkook said. But Jeon and we started finding pieces. Pieces of something we can't explain. You should have told me, Taehyung said, barely holding back the quake in his voice. You were already breaking, Jungkook said softly. I didn't want to add fuel to the fire. You don't get to make that decision for me. They stood there, staring each other down, years of friendship and loyalty threatening to go up in flames. Then the apartment door opened. Jeon. His presence was always quiet, like a shadow just out of reach. But tonight he looked different, pale, haunted. He shut the door gently behind him, eyes flicking between the two. I didn't know he saw, Jeon said softly. I don't care, Taehyung spat. I think you do, Jeon replied. That was the thing about Jeon. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His words struck deep because he knew where to aim. You and Jungkook have always had this bond, Jeon continued. But this isn't about choosing. It's about surviving. And I wasn't part of that survival? Taehyung demanded. Jeon hesitated. You grieved differently. That's a coward's excuse, Taehyung shot back. You both made a world without me in it. And now you expect me to just understand. We didn't mean to leave you out, Jungkook said, stepping closer. It just happened. That's the problem, Taehyung hissed. Things don't just happen. People choose. And you chose each other. Jin's voice cracked slightly. There's something you need to see. No, Taehyung said. There's something you need to see. He turned, storming into his room. When he returned, he held a tattered notebook. His fingers trembled as he passed it to Jungkook. I wrote this the night Sukmin disappeared, he said. Every thought, every theory, every nightmare. While you two were off chasing ghosts, I was here, falling apart alone. Jungkook opened the notebook. The pages were full of scrawled entries, some coherent, some not. Sketches of eyes, notes on dreams, references to a whispering voice, a circle of symbols Taehyung didn't understand. Jin's face paled as he looked over Jungkook's shoulder. You've seen it too. What? Taehyung asked. That circle, Jin said. That's not just trauma, Taehyung. That's the same symbol we found behind the train station, where we last saw Sukmin. A beat passed, then another. Something inside Taehyung shifted. Not softened but realigned. The anger remained, thick and bitter, but a thread of curiosity wove through it. What do you mean you found it? He asked carefully. Jungkook looked up. We've been tracking a pattern. Symbols, disappearances, they all lead back to that place. The last known location. Jin added. And to something older than we ever imagined. Taehyung narrowed his eyes. Why not go to the police? We tried, Jungkook said. No one listened. They called it grief-induced hallucinations. Said we were imagining things. But you're not. No. Taehyung looked at the notebook in Jungkook's hands. The pages now felt like evidence. Like testimony. What do you want from me? He asked finally. Jin stepped forward. Help us finish what we started. Come with us. Tomorrow night. We're going back. To the station? To what's beneath it? Taehyung hesitated. His entire body screamed to walk away. To slam the door on all of it. Ghosts. Betrayal. Cryptic symbols. Jungkook's damn eyes begging for forgiveness. But something else stirred deeper. Hope. Or maybe vengeance. He met Jungkook's gaze. I'm not doing this for you. Jungkook nodded. Understood. I still don't forgive you. I don't expect you to. Good. They stood there in silence. Somewhere beneath the city, something stirred. Something ancient. Watching. Waiting. And for the first time in months, the three of them stood together again. Not whole, not healed, but aligned. The ruins of trust lay around them like broken glass. But sometimes, broken things cut the deepest. And sometimes, blood was the only way to uncover truth. The sound of gravel crunching beneath their boots echoed in the dark tunnel like the slow gnash of unseen teeth. The air was thick with mildew and electricity, the kind that buzzed just under the skin. Every few meters, a dying fluorescent bulb flickered above, casting their shadows across the damp concrete like ghosts that refused to move on. Taehyung walked ahead, flashlight in hand, jaw tight and eyes colder than steel. Behind him, Jungkook followed silently, his steps careful, as though trying not to disturb whatever slept beneath their feet. Jin brought up the rear, a folded map clutched in one gloved hand, the other clutching a rusted key. Why the hell would anyone build a door under a train station? Taehyung muttered, eyes scanning the walls, which were littered with graffiti and strange etchings. It wasn't always a train station, Jin said quietly. This part of the city used to be a monastery. Before that, it was said to be a place of offerings. Offerings? Taehyung scoffed, turning sharply. You mean sacrifices? Jin didn't answer. He didn't need to. You really believe that? Taehyung pressed. Jungkook's voice was low, gravelly. We've seen too much not to. The three stopped in front of an archway bricked into the tunnel wall, half covered in moss and cement. The outline of a sealed door could barely be made out beneath centuries of grime. And in the center, faint but unmistakable, was the circle. The same symbol from Taehyung's notebook. The same one from Jungkook's dreams. The same one that haunted Jin's mirror. Jin brushed his hand across the surface. The symbol shimmered slightly under the flashlight, as if resisting the light. This is it, he said. Taehyung stared at the sigil, his breath catching. I've drawn this in my sleep for months. Jungkook moved forward and placed his palm over the symbol. It reacts to us. The key in Jin's hand began to tremble. Slowly, he stepped forward and slid it into a hidden slot near the base of the arch. With a sound like a sigh from the earth itself, the door unlocked. Behind it was blackness, pure and absolute. You first, Taehyung said to Jungkook, his voice clipped. Jungkook didn't flinch. He stepped into the darkness. They descended a spiral staircase carved from stone, each step slick with moisture and older than any of them could comprehend. The air smelled of rust and wet soil. As they reached the bottom, the space opened into a cavernous chamber lit by strange, organic light, pulsing veins of phosphorescence that glowed from the walls. And at the center, a circle of broken stone columns. Ancient, crumbling. Within the circle, something moved. Taehyung's breath caught. Is that? A figure stood facing away from them. Humanoid, dressed in the same hoodie Seokmin had worn the day he vanished. Seokmin? Jungkook whispered, voice cracking. The figure didn't move. Seokmin, it's me, Jungkook said, stepping forward. Don't. Jean grabbed his arm, but it was too late. The figure turned. It was not Seokmin. The thing wore his face, his clothes, but its eyes, solid black, endless, betrayed it. Its mouth opened, and a sound like 1,000 insect wings filled the chamber. Taehyung staggered back, hands clamped over his ears. What the hell is that? Jungkook stood frozen. The thing cocked its head, mimicking Seokmin's mannerisms perfectly. I missed you, it said in Seokmin's voice. Jungkook's lips trembled. This isn't real. No, the thing said. It's memory. It's longing. It's you. Jean raised a small vial and threw it at the creature. The glass shattered against its chest, spilling a viscous blue liquid. The thing screamed. The sound split the air. I told you it wasn't him, Jean shouted. The illusion burned away. What remained was a twisted creature, all limbs and shadows, its flesh a shifting mass of screaming faces. It lunged. Jungkook pulled Taehyung down just as it flew overhead, crashing into the stone wall. Debris fell. Taehyung rolled, heart pounding, and grabbed a jagged rock from the floor. Run! Fight! He yelled. Trap it, Jean replied. We can't kill it, not here. The creature moved like smoke, vanishing and reappearing. Each time it shifted, a different face emerged. Seokmin, their old teacher, Jungkook himself. Taehyung's panic turned to fury. I'm not afraid of you, he said through gritted teeth. You're nothing but a parasite feeding on pain. The creature laughed, a sound that echoed inside his skull. Then give me more. It lunged again, this time for Jean. Taehyung moved on instinct, throwing the rock with all his strength. It struck the creature's side, causing it to screech and stumble. Now! Jean shouted. He opened a book, small, leather-bound, filled with pages of ancient script, and began chanting. Symbols on the floor flared to life. The creature screamed again as light poured from the cracks in the ground, wrapping around it like chains. Thrashed, eyes locking with Taehyung's. He begged me not to die alone. Then it vanished, sucked into the ground with a roar that shook the chamber. Silence fell. Only their ragged breathing remained. Taehyung collapsed to his knees. Jungkook knelt beside him. Are you okay? Taehyung looked at him. There was no hatred in his eyes now, just exhaustion and something deeper, something like grief. You saw him, Taehyung whispered. You both saw something. Why didn't you just tell me? Jungkook looked broken. Because it wasn't just Seokmin. We started seeing other things. Shadows of people we hadn't lost yet. Jean added, this isn't over. That thing is just a servant. A scout. Something older is coming. Why us? Taehyung asked. Because we opened the door, Jean said. And now, we have to close it. The way back was quiet. They didn't speak until they reached the surface. The city was just beginning to wake. Light filtered through clouds, soft and hesitant. Jungkook turned to Taehyung. Thank you for coming. Taehyung didn't answer right away. He looked at the skyline, then at Jean, then back at Jungkook. I still hate you. Jungkook nodded. I know, but I think I hate that thing more. Jean cracked a tired smile. Then we might stand a chance. As they walked away from the station, none of them saw the dark figure watching from the shadows of the alley. Its eyes glowing faintly, a crooked smile forming on its face as it whispered with Seokmin's stolen voice. This is only the beginning. The scream didn't come from the streets. It came from inside the walls. Taehyung jerked awake, chest heaving, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded like a drum played by a vengeful god. The apartment was dark except for the flickering TV in the living room, where static hissed like whispers trying to claw their way out. He stared at the ceiling, trying to convince himself it was just a dream, another leftover from the nightmare below the station. Then he heard it again, a whisper, unmistakable. "Tai!" He leapt to his feet and burst into the hallway. Jungkook stood by the window, shirtless again, bathed in the glow of early morning. He didn't flinch as Taehyung approached, but his eyes were bloodshot, haunted. "You heard it too," Taehyung said. Jungkook nodded. "It said my name." Jeon emerged from the kitchen, holding a coffee mug with trembling fingers. "This apartment is compromised." "Compromised?" Taehyung snapped. "What the hell does that even mean, Jeon?" "It followed us. The entity, whatever it is, attached itself to our thoughts, our pain. That creature we saw wasn't just a scout. It was a memory leech, and now it's feeding off our regrets." Taehyung's jaw clenched. "So what? We just sit here and let it tear through our minds like pages in a diary?" "No," Jeon said. "We trace it back." "To what?" "To the original trauma. To where this all started." Taehyung laughed bitterly. "You mean the night Sukmin vanished?" "No," Jeon said. "Years before that." The room fell silent. Jungkook lowered his gaze. "What are you talking about?" "There's a reason we were chosen," Jeon said. "Why us? Why this group? Why this apartment? This station? This city? None of it's random." Taehyung's pulse quickened. "You've been hiding more." "I didn't know how to tell you," Jeon admitted. "But when I was 13, I found the circle, drawn on the floor of my grandmother's attic. I saw her whispering to it, and I saw it whisper back." Jungkook took a step back. "You've known about this for years?" "She told me it was a protection ritual," Jeon said. "But after she died, the whispers didn't stop. I started drawing it in my sleep. Same as you, Taehyung. I thought I was going insane." Taehyung's fists clenched at his sides. "You should have told us everything from the start." "I know." "No, you don't know," Taehyung snapped, stepping toward him. "You brought us into this. You dragged me back into a nightmare I didn't choose. And now there's something in our walls, whispering in our ears, using Sukmin's voice like a goddamn puppet." Jungkook stepped between them. "We need to stay focused." "I am focused," Taehyung growled. "Focused on the fact that every second we waste, that thing gets stronger." A loud bang interrupted them. A picture frame on the wall had fallen. Glass shattered across the floor. Behind the picture, scratched into the paint, was the symbol again. None of them had done it. "It's already inside," Jeon whispered. The lights flickered. Then the static returned, louder than before. The TV burst into life. Footage played, grainy, warped, almost like a home video. A hallway. A train station. A boy in a hoodie, Sukmin. The camera angle shifted violently. Screaming. The sound cut in and out like a signal being hijacked. And then, the last frame froze on Sukmin's face. Eyes wide with terror, lips moving. He was saying something. Jungkook leaned in. "Can you make it out?" Taehyung asked. Jungkook nodded slowly. He said, "Don't trust the light." The room fell into pitch darkness. No flicker. No backup generator. Not even the soft glow of the city outside. Just absolute unnatural black. And then, from the darkness, "You open the door. Now burn in the light." The lights came back with a snap. The apartment was empty. Jeon was gone. Taehyung and Jungkook stood in stunned silence. He had been standing right beside them. Jungkook's voice cracked. "Where is he?" Taehyung grabbed his flashlight and turned in a full circle. "Jeon!" No response. Jungkook ran to the door. It was still locked. He didn't leave. He vanished. Taehyung's chest ached. "It's playing with us. Taking us one by one." The TV screen flickered again. This time, a symbol. But it wasn't the circle. It was a location. Jungkook pulled out his phone, comparing the coordinates. It's the rooftop. The same place it started. Taehyung felt ice in his veins. Where you hugged him. Jungkook's voice was barely audible. Where we lost Sukmin. They didn't speak again as they ascended the stairs. The rooftop door creaked open to a scene washed in moonlight. The city was quiet, eerily so. At the far edge of the rooftop stood Jeon, his back to them. Taehyung was the first to move. Jeon. No response. He moved closer. Hyung. Jeon turned. His eyes were bleeding. Black tears ran down his cheeks like tar. He opened his mouth, and Sukmin's voice came out. I waited for you. You never came. So I had to let it in. Jungkook stepped forward. We're here now. We're not leaving you. Jeon laughed, bitter and broken. Too late. The shadows around his feet writhed and spread. An abyss opening beneath him. Taehyung rushed forward. Jeon whispered one last thing. Forgive me. Then he fell. Taehyung screamed, reaching, but the shadows closed like a maw. He dropped to his knees at the edge, gasping, broken. Jungkook stood behind him, frozen. We're losing everything, Taehyung whispered. No, Jungkook said, his voice suddenly clear. We're going to end this. He held up his phone. The symbol. It's changing. Taehyung looked. The circle was no longer closed. It had a break, a way in, or a way out. They looked at each other, and for the first time their hatred took a backseat to resolve. We go back, Jungkook said. To where it all began, Taehyung replied. To the source, they said together. Below them, something stirred in the dark. Watching, waiting, feeding. Do you trust me? The question came not with softness, but like a slap in the dark. Jungkook asked it without turning around, his back to Taehyung as he stared at the pulsing map on his phone. The broken circle now glowing, shifting like a living thing. Taehyung didn't answer. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and thick, until Jungkook sighed and shoved the phone into his pocket. Doesn't matter. You will have to. Taehyung exhaled slowly through his nose. I trusted you once. You remember how that ended. Jungkook turned now, stepping forward until they stood face to face under the orange glow of the emergency stairwell light. Yes, he said, voice low. It ended with me holding someone who was slipping away, while you stood in the shadows and walked out. Taehyung's jaw clenched. You think I walked out on Sukmin? On you. I think you walked out on yourself, Jungkook replied, and the sting was immediate. Taehyung shoved him hard against the wall. You think I wanted any of this? You think I wanted to stand there and watch my best friend melt into the arms of another like I was a fucking stranger? Jungkook didn't flinch. Then why didn't you fight for him? Because I was busy fighting myself. The words were ripped from Taehyung's chest like they had claws. He stepped back, hands shaking. I was scared. I hated what I was feeling. I hated you. But more than that, I hated how much I didn't want to hate you. And now Jin's gone. And Sukmin's a shadow wrapped around some ancient parasite. And I'm still trying to decide whether I'd forgive you even if I could. Jungkook straightened, brushing off his shirt. You don't have to forgive me. But you do have to go down there with me. There was a pause. Taehyung closed his eyes and leaned back against the opposite wall. You really think that's where we'll find Jeon? No, Jungkook said. I think we'll find something worse. The entrance beneath the old train station had changed. Where before the bricks had been silent, forgotten. Now the circle glowed visibly even in daylight. Passers-by didn't notice. Not a single head turned. It was like the world had agreed to pretend it didn't exist. Taehyung touched the symbol. Pulsed. Warm. Bit. Blood, he muttered. Jungkook nodded grimly. It's feeding faster now. Together, they pried the stone aside again and descended. The spiral staircase had shifted. No longer just stone, the walls were covered in black veins. The air smelled of iron and rotting flowers. As they moved deeper, voices began to echo, overlapping, tangled. Some were their own. Some were Jin's. Some were Sukmin's. But some were unknown, ancient, female, chanting in tongues long lost. I don't like this, Taehyung muttered. You don't have to like it, Jungkook replied. You just have to survive it. They emerged into the chamber. The columns were gone. In their place, twisted spires of flesh and bone, pulsing with what looked like heartbeats. The floor had split, revealing a deep, black chasm. And above it, suspended like a marionette, was Jeon. Naked, unmoving, strings of black light tethered to his wrists and ankles. His eyes snapped open as they entered. You shouldn't have come, he said. It's too late. I've seen it. Taehyung ran forward, but the ground shifted beneath him, becoming soft, like skin. He fell to his knees. Jungkook shouted, Jeon, what is this place? Jin's voice was too calm. The inside of the memory, the root of the circle. We aren't meant to see this. It's where regret becomes real. The shadows gathered. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, faceless, crawling. And then, Sukmin stepped forward from the abyss. He looked whole, clean, like the last time he'd smiled. Don't trust it, Jeon whispered. That's not him. Then why does he look like the last good day I ever had? Taehyung asked. Sukmin reached out a hand. Come back. The flame in the center of the room didn't flicker. Pulsed, steady, alive, unnatural. No wind, no breath disturbed it. It floated 2 inches above the cracked tile floor of Jin's apartment like a quiet god observing its worshippers in silence. Taehyung stared at it for over an hour. He didn't move, didn't blink much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jin's bleeding ones, his body suspended by tendrils of black memory, whispering secrets to an ancient hunger. Even after they had pulled him out, cleaned the rot from under his fingernails, bathed him in silence and moonlight, he still hadn't spoken a word. Now, Jeon lay curled on the couch, asleep or maybe just pretending to be, while Jungkook paced the hallway like a soldier walking off guilt. Taehyung sat cross-legged before the flame. They're calling it a gas leak, Jungkook finally said. The police. About the explosion near the old train station. You saw the crater. That wasn't gas. Taehyung's voice was calm, cold. They're not supposed to see the truth. That's how this thing survives. Obscurity. Jungkook paused. Since when do you sound like Jeon? Since I saw hell blink. Silence again. Jungkook came and sat down beside him. Not too close. Enough to be present. Not enough to be forgiven. Taehyung didn't look at him. I've been trying to remember, he said. That kiss. The one you never told me about. Jungkook flinched. I remember the taste of cheap beer. Your hand on my shoulder. The way you looked at me like I wasn't supposed to look back. Jungkook stared at the floor. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. It did, Jungkook admitted. Taehyung turned to him now. Do you regret it? Jungkook hesitated. I regret what it did to you. You chose Sukmin. I did. Taehyung swallowed. And now he's not Sukmin anymore. Jungkook's voice was almost a whisper. No. Taehyung leaned forward, his breath mingling with the strange warmth of the hovering flame. So who's next, Jungkook? Who gets to die screaming with a borrowed voice? Jungkook's head snapped up. We stopped it. No, Taehyung said. We delayed it. We heard it. But we didn't kill it. Behind them, Jeon groaned in his sleep. A whisper spilled from his lips. She's coming. Taehyung was on his feet in seconds. Did you hear that? Jungkook moved to Jeon, gently shaking his shoulder. Jeon, who's coming? Who? Jin's eyes opened, but they were not his. They were gold, shining, cruel. His mouth moved, but the voice that came from him was layered. 3 voices speaking in unison. One male, one female, one that sounded like tearing paper. The mother of the circle. The fire beneath the memory. You unsealed her cage. Taehyung grabbed a nearby lamp and smashed it across Jin's face. The light vanished. Jeon gasped awake, screaming, clutching at his chest. It hurts. It still hurts. Jungkook held him, whispering, rocking gently. Taehyung watched from the corner. Cold. Distant. You're not surprised, he said. Jeon didn't meet his gaze. I knew she'd come eventually. Who is she? She has no name. Not one meant for mouths like ours. But the old ones called her Nissa, the memory that doesn't forget. The mother, Jungkook whispered. Of all this, Jeon nodded. She feeds on what's left behind. Guilt, regret, lies too old to confess. She's what they worshipped in the monastery before the station was ever built. And she's loose now? Taehyung asked. She was never caged, Jeon said. Just buried. And we woke her. Outside, sirens screamed. But none of them moved. The room felt too full of something else. Something vast and invisible. The flame in the center had turned violet. Taehyung sat back down. I'm not doing this again, he said. Jeon looked at him. You don't have a choice. Ido. I walk away. I pretend it's over. Let the rest of the world burn for once. You'll burn too, Jungkook said. Taehyung's laughter was sharp. I've been burning since the first time he said your name like it meant more than mine. Jungkook didn't respond. He just stared into the flame. Jeon stood slowly. We need to go back. Not to the station. Further. Taehyung's blood turned to ice. How far? Jeon opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. Faded. Curled at the corners. 3 boys. Younger. Smiling. A forest in the background. An old house with a red door. Taehyung took a step back. No. That's where we first drew the circle, Jeon said. Where we summoned something we thought was a game. Where she touched us first. We were kids. She doesn't care. Jungkook took the photo, tracing the red door with his thumb. I remember this place. We stayed for a weekend. There was a storm. Power went out. And we played the game, Jeon said. Light a match. Make a wish. Speak a name. And wait. Taehyung turned away, gripping the back of the chair until his knuckles turned white. I saw her. Jin's voice was gentle. I know. I thought it was a nightmare. That I forgot. You never forgot, Jeon said. You buried her. The flame turned blue. She was listening. Jungkook stood. Then we dig her up. Taehyung looked at them both. If we go back there, it won't just be her waiting. No, Jeon agreed. It'll be the parts of us we left behind. Taehyung nodded. Then we take fire, he said. And we make it scream. By nightfall they were on the road. 3 boys in a car full of relics. Candles. Salt. Old journals. A blade none of them could identify. The forest loomed ahead like a waiting jaw. The road to the red door had opened. And behind it Nissa smiled. The car creaked as it came to a slow stop, the tires crunching over brittle leaves and damp soil. It was dusk, neither day nor night, and everything around them breathed in silence. Trees arched overhead like twisted cathedral beams, their bare limbs clawing at the pale lavender sky. Taehyung was the first to open his door. The air hit him like a memory. Wet moss, distant rain, and the faint copper scent of blood long since dried. The wind carried whispers only his bones seemed to hear. He didn't wait for the others. His boots found the path before his thoughts could. Jungkook stepped out slower, his eyes scanning the tree line. He had a blade strapped to his thigh, a charm stitched into his hoodie, and a sigil drawn in ash behind his left ear. Jeon followed last, silent, clutching the photograph like it was a compass instead of a reminder. They stood before it. The house was smaller than Taehyung remembered. A squat, rotting shell of childhood dare and adolescent thrill. The paint was faded into a corpse gray, but the door, it remained red, unweathered, as though time refused to touch it, as though it fed off being remembered. None of them moved. She knows we're here, Jeon whispered. She knew the second we left Seoul, Jungkook added. Taehyung exhaled sharply. Let's not keep her waiting. The door opened by itself. No wind, no hand. It simply swung inward like a mouth smiling. They entered. The floorboards groaned under their weight, soaked in age and something worse. Dust hung thick in the air, but the smell, it wasn't just old wood and mold. It was something living, sour, sweet, rancid, like milk left under a child's bed, like rot that smiled. Inside, the living room was untouched. An old couch still sat under a plastic-covered lamp. A photo of someone else's family clung crookedly to the wall. The carpet was stained where none of them had spilled anything. Taehyung walked to the center of the room. It was here, he said. Jean nodded. The circle. Jungkook knelt and scraped a line in the carpet. The old wood beneath still held the groove. Still bore the shape they carved when they were 12. A childish imitation of a summoning. 7 points. 1 wish. 1 name spoken in unison. They had never agreed on the name. And still it had worked. Taehyung stood over the groove and whispered, Nissa. The lights snapped on. All of them. The house was glowing. The couch was new again. The carpet clean. The air warm and filled with laughter. Their laughter. 3 boys playing. Shadows racing across the walls. A fire in the hearth that hadn't existed for 20 years. She's showing us what we want, Jean said. To stay. To forget. Taehyung watched a version of himself sprint down the stairs. Laughing, hair bouncing, face untouched by trauma. A ghost of innocence. Bleeding into light. Don't look, Jungkook muttered. It gets inside you. But Taehyung didn't look away. You were happy, he whispered to no one. You were happy and I ruined it. No, said a voice behind him. It was Sukmin. Alive. Whole. Leaning on the banister like nothing had happened.
No Evis. No mimicry. No screams.
Sukmin. Jungkook breathed. You didn't ruin anything, Tae? Sukmin said, stepping down the stairs. You tried to love someone. That's not a sin. Taehyung stumbled back. Sukmin kept walking, calm. You thought I didn't know? That I didn't see the way you looked at him? I did. I just didn't care. I wanted you to be happy. Taehyung's hands shook. But you were gone. I was taken, Sukmin said. Because I was weak. I said the name. You said Nissa? Sukmin nodded. I made the wish. I asked for time to stop. For us to never grow up. For us to never drift apart. Taehyung's voice broke. And she answered. She always answers, Sukmin said. But there's a price. There's always a price. The lights flickered. The room shivered. The younger versions of them froze, then began to melt. Faces sloughing into wax, smiles turning inside out. Sukmin smiled softly. She's here now. The fireplace roared. The red door slammed shut. And from the shadows beneath the stairs, something crawled. Not fast. Not violent. Just inevitable. It was tall. Female in shape but stretched beyond logic. Skin like burned parchment cracking at the joints. No eyes. A mouth that never stopped smiling. She walked without sound. Each step bending the house like a heartbeat under a boot. Don't speak, Jean warned. Don't answer. Don't wish. But Taehyung already felt her in his throat. She turned to him and spoke. Do you still love him, little fire? The room blurred. The other 2 vanished. Only him and her. Taehyung's mouth opened on its own. Yes. She leaned closer, smiling wider. Then burn for it. Pain erupted through his chest, hot, real, overwhelming. He dropped to the floor, choking, screaming. His hands clawed at his skin, and under it he saw light. Not blood. Light. No, he gasped. No, not this. She whispered in his ear. I will turn every confession into ash. Every feeling into fire. He felt himself fracturing, consciousness stretching like a rubber band, snapping across moments. Jungkook. The kiss. Jean. Screaming in the station. Sukmin. Reaching but never close enough. Taehyung convulsed. Then he heard Jungkook screaming his name. And the fire stopped. The room returned. She was gone. And Jungkook held him, shaking, pressing their foreheads together. You're here, Jungkook whispered. You're here with me. Taehyung cried. It was the first real thing he had done in years. Behind them, Jean was already carving into the wall. This house is her altar, he said. We finish it here, or she follows us everywhere. How do we finish it? Jungkook asked. We rewrite the circle. Jean tossed Taehyung a knife. Blood, he said. Memory. And one truth none of us have dared to speak. Taehyung stared at the blade. His hand moved before his mind agreed. The cut was shallow, but enough. He pressed it into the groove of the old circle, watched it fill. The house screamed. Then Jungkook stepped forward. I chose you, he said. Taehyung looked up, stunned. Not Sukmin. Not anyone. I lied to you. I was scared. But I've only ever wanted you. Taehyung's knees buckled. Jeon sliced his own palm and completed the line. The circle is memory, he said. We make a new one. They held hands. The house shook. The red door cracked. From the outside, someone was coming. But this time, they were ready. The red door burst inward. Not with force but with intention. The wood groaned like it had been holding its breath for 100 years. Outside, the forest hissed, leaves trembling without wind, as if the very trees had caught on to the presence behind that door. Taehyung stepped forward first. There was blood on his shirt, a shallow cut on his palm, but his eyes were clear, sharp, exhausted, done running. Jungkook followed close behind, face pale but resolute, fingers twitching near the handle of the ritual blade tucked in his waistband. Jeon stood in the middle, hunched slightly, whispering to himself in an ancient cadence, fingers smeared with ash and blood. A woman stood in the doorway, but she wasn't human. She wore a dress made of old memories. It shimmered and shifted, sometimes school uniforms, sometimes funeral clothes, once the hoodie Sukmin had vanished in. Her hair fell like black ink down to her knees, tangled with things that looked like teeth and pieces of old letters. Her face wasn't a face, it was everyone's face. Jin's mother, Taehyung's childhood crush, Jungkook's late grandmother, Sukmin, the woman from Jungkook's first dream. All of them and none. Nissa stepped into the house. The floor didn't creak beneath her. It wilted. She smiled, and the walls bled. Jeon whispered, "She's not a ghost. She's a god." Taehyung said nothing. He stared at her. "Do you remember?" she said to him. "What you promised that night? When you knelt at the circle and gave me your blood the first time. I was 12. You were sincere," she replied. "I've never forgotten sincerity." Jungkook stepped between them. "We ended the circle." She turned to him. "You broke it. You didn't end it. You left it open, leaking." Her hand flicked. Jungkook flew backward, crashing into the wall. Taehyung shouted, rushing to him. But Jeon raised a hand. "Don't. She's trying to isolate us. Divide us. That's how she gets in." "She already got in," Jungkook hissed, wincing as he stood. "She's been in my dreams for years." "She doesn't want to kill us," Jeon said. "She wants us to surrender. Willingly. It's part of the deal." Nissa stepped deeper into the room. Every step she took erased something. The lamp Taehyung had broken earlier was whole again. The couch mended itself. Time rewound around her. The house forgot it had decayed. "Give me one of you," she said, "and I'll let the other two go." "Go where?" Jeon asked. "Anywhere. Everywhere. Memory. Heaven. Soul." Taehyung stood slowly. "And the one we give?" Nissa smiled wider. "He becomes me." The silence in the room was instant and thunderous. "No," Jungkook said. "You're not taking any of us." "Do you know how many people have said that?" she asked softly. "Your friend Sukmin said it too. Right before he gave me his voice." "Let him go," Taehyung said. "Let him speak again." "I can't. You gave him to me." Jeon flinched.
No.
"We didn't." "You did," she said, stepping toward him. "When you played the game. When you made the circle. When you whispered your names and made your wishes. One wanted love. One wanted courage. One wanted never to be forgotten." She turned her faceless gaze to each of them. "Love," she said, looking at Taehyung. "Courage," to Jungkook. "And memory," to Jeon. "All of it came to pass. I kept my side. By destroying us," Taehyung spat. "No," she whispered. "By fulfilling you." A flick of her wrist. Jeon screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his skull. "She's inside." Jungkook caught him as he collapsed. "What did you do?" "I showed him everything he asked for. Nissa said. All the memories. Every second of every moment he's ever forgotten. He wanted to remember. Now he will. Taehyung moved faster than he ever had. The ritual blade was out of Jungkook's waistband and in his hand in an instant. Then I'll make you forget what pain feels like. He lunged. Nissa didn't move. The knife stopped an inch from her skin. Her voice was suddenly everywhere. Inside them. Around them. I am pain, she said. I don't fear it. I feed on it. The room burst open into a storm of visions. Every wall became a memory. Every corner a past they couldn't run from. Taehyung saw himself crying alone at 13, praying to be loved. Jungkook saw himself holding a dying Sukmin, screaming apologies he couldn't finish. Jeon saw his mother disappear behind a locked door, never returning, never explaining. The floor cracked. The house began to crumble from the inside. She's breaking the circle backward, Jeon screamed. Unmaking it, erasing us. Taehyung forced himself up, blade still in hand. No, he said. She doesn't win. He turned to Jungkook. I need you to choose. Jungkook blinked. What? You said you chose me. Prove it. What are you saying? I'm saying if you love me, burn me, light the memory, destroy the seed. I am the circle's start. Jeon gasped.
No.
No, that's not. Yes, it is. Taehyung shouted. She touched me first. She marked me. That's why she keeps coming back. I opened the circle. I gave her the first drop. You two just kept it spinning. Jungkook stared at him. Then at the knife. You'll die. I'll be free. Nissa moved to stop them. But Jeon screamed something ancient, and the ceiling collapsed in vines of black fire, buying seconds. Taehyung grabbed Jungkook's hand. I forgive you, he said. Don't.
Ido.
I love you, Jungkook. And I forgive you. Then he drove the blade into his own heart. The house ignited. Not with fire but with memory. Every wall exploded with laughter, tears, screams, smiles. Nissa screamed. Not in pain, but in rage. No, no, no. This is not the way, this is not the deal. Jungkook held Taehyung as the room dissolved into light. Jeon crawled forward, carving one final symbol into the floor. A closed circle.
No brax.
The light consumed them all. And then, silence. Jungkook woke first. He was in a hospital. Seoul. The real world.
No shadows.
Jeon was asleep in the chair nearby, for in his arm. Taehyung's bed was empty. A nurse entered. He didn't make it, she said softly. But, she handed Jungkook something. A notebook. Taehyung's. The first page read, if you're reading this, then the circle is closed. I hope you remember me, but if you don't, that's okay too. I chose this. I chose you. Jungkook cried for the first time in years. Outside the window, a red door sat across the street. Unopened, unbroken, and silent. The red door was supposed to be gone. Destroyed. Buried in memory and fire. Sealed by sacrifice. And yet, there it was silent, watching, patient. As if waiting for someone to knock. Jungkook stood at the crosswalk across the street, his fingers gripping the notebook Taehyung had left behind. It was early morning in Seoul. The city moved on like it always did. Horns blared. Coffee vendors shouted. Students laughed on their way to class. And yet the air around the red door felt still, suspended, unreal. He hadn't told Jeon. Jeon was still healing, both from the psychic weight of Nissa and the blood loss from the final ritual. He barely spoke, mostly scribbled in a different language now. Symbols, glyphs, things older than time. Jungkook feared that some part of him had stayed behind in that burning house. But Jungkook couldn't rest. Not after the funeral. Not after the dream. It hadn't felt like a dream. It had been Taehyung. Not a vision. Not a whisper. Real. Solid. Sitting on the edge of his bed like he used to. You think it's over, he had said. Jungkook sat up in the dream, heart racing. You're dead. Taehyung's smile had been tired. So was Sukmin. So is Jeon in a way. Death isn't an ending. It's just the deepest kind of memory. Is that what you are now? A memory? I'm a key. Taehyung said. And she still wants to use me. Jungkook had reached for him, but his hand had passed through air. And then he woke up screaming. Now, standing here, the red door in front of him again, Jungkook understood. It was a lure. A wound that never closed. A test. He crossed the street. The closer he got, the more wrong everything felt. The alley seemed too long. The sidewalk bricks slightly off rhythm. The shadows stretched a little too far. He stopped at the threshold. There was no handle.
No lock.
Just a red surface, glossy and blood-warm. He pressed his hand to it. It opened. Inside was not the house. It was her. Nissa. She sat on a throne of hands, writhing, reaching. Her form was different now. Not a woman. Not a man. Just shape. Desire. Gravity. The memory of need. You still carry him, she said. Jungkook didn't flinch. I carry everyone you hurt. Nissa's voice was a chorus. I gave you truth. You begged for it. You bled for it. You lied. No, she hissed. I told you what you didn't want to hear. I gave you the clarity you lacked. The confession you feared. Jungkook stepped into the room. The floor rippled beneath him, like walking on the surface of a lake made of light and breath. Why are you here? She asked. You won. The circle is closed. No, Jungkook said. It's broken. Not closed. Nissa tilted her knot head. Jungkook held up the notebook. He wrote something else. After the final page. Hidden in the seam. He opened it. Inside, a torn piece of paper. A symbol neither of them had drawn before. Not a circle. Not a line. But a door. Taehyung said there was another way. Not to seal you. To undo you. Nissa's voice turned sharp. He was mistaken. He's never been clearer. The room began to shift. The hands turned to ash. The throne crumbled. She stood now, tall and unholy, radiating heat and cold at the same time. If you finish that sigil, you'll burn everything, she said. Then let it burn. Jungkook took out the chalk. Taehyung's chalk, soaked with ash from the ritual fire. He began to draw. The lines glowed gold. The floor screamed. Reality pulsed. Nissa lunged. She reached for his throat, but he finished the line. Everything exploded. Not outward. Inward. He fell through her. Through the door. Through himself. When he landed, it was snowing. Soul was gone. So was the house. The door. The throne. He was in a white field. And someone was singing. He turned. Taehyung. Not bleeding. Not broken. Wearing the same sweater he'd worn the night they first stayed up until dawn talking about dreams and death. You found the door, Taehyung said. You wrote it. I became it, Taehyung replied. Memory isn't just what survives. It's what resists. Jungkook ran to him. They embraced. Real. Solid. I miss you, Jungkook sobbed. You never lost me, Taehyung whispered. They stood in silence. The wind was soft here.
No shadows. No screams.
Just stillness. But you can't stay, Taehyung said. You're still alive. I don't want to go back. You have to. Jean needs you. Jungkook pulled away. And you? I'll be here, Taehyung said. Waiting. But not hurting. Not haunted. Jungkook swallowed. I love you. Taehyung smiled. You always did. Even when you didn't know. He touched Jungkook's forehead. And the world blinked. Jungkook woke in a hospital bed. Again. But this time Jean was sitting up, speaking in clear sentences. You were gone for 2 days, Jean said. Where the hell did you go? To the place between forgetting and forgiving, Jungkook replied. To him. Jean didn't ask more. He just nodded. What now? Jungkook asked. We live, Jean said. We remember. Outside, the red door was gone, replaced by a mural. A painting of 3 boys in a forest. A circle. And a fire. And beneath it, written in Taehyung's handwriting, to remember is to resist. The world moved on. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. The mural was beautiful in the way a bruise is beautiful. Shaded with consequence, outlined in pain. Jungkook stood beneath it just past midnight, hoodie soaked from the drizzle, eyes scanning the image for details that hadn't been there yesterday. They were subtle. Shadows beneath the boy's feet. A fourth figure standing half-faded behind the trees. A sliver of red hidden in the corner. Too thin to be the door, too bright to be coincidence. It was growing. He touched the paint. Pulsed warm. Jean had been acting strange all week. No longer mumbling in forgotten tongues, but listening, as if someone else were whispering from inside him. Sometimes he stared at walls for hours. Sometimes he blinked too slowly, like he was watching things behind his eyes. When Jungkook confronted him, Jean just smiled and said, "Some knowledge doesn't let go." Jungkook hadn't told him what Taehyung said in the field of snow. He hadn't told anyone about the name Taehyung whispered before they parted. A name Jungkook had never heard before. Not Nissa, not memory, but something deeper, more buried. He hadn't even spoken it aloud. Until now, standing beneath the mural, heart pounding like a ticking curse, Jungkook whispered, "Arathea." The street lamps flickered out. The mural shifted, and behind him a voice answered, "You weren't supposed to remember that." He turned. Jean. But not Jean. His eyes were gold again. Jungkook stepped back. How long? Since the ritual, Jean said, or whatever was wearing Jean. She splintered. Nissa broke when you rewrote the circle. Pieces of her fled. One found sanctuary in him. "You're not her," Jungkook said.
No.
"I am her echo." But he let me in. Jean would never. Jean wanted to understand. He always did. Curiosity is its own invitation. Jungkook's voice turned cold. "Let him go." The thing inside Jean tilted its head. "Let you go first." And then it touched his forehead. Jungkook was yanked backward into himself. Into memory. No, not memory, unmemory. Not what was remembered. What had been erased. Hidden. Banished by names too dangerous to repeat. He saw the night Taehyung first bled in the woods. But not as it happened. As it was meant to happen. There had been a fourth boy. Not Sukmin. Not Jean. Not Jungkook. A boy none of them remembered. Because the circle demanded a sacrifice. A boy with a stutter. A boy who loved stars. A boy who said, "Don't draw the seventh point." And then he vanished. Erased. Arathea was not the mother. She was the mouth. The vessel that swallows what must be forgotten. The fourth boy had said her name first. And paid for it. Jungkook gasped awake, coughing blood. Jean, no, the thing was gone. In its place. A name carved into the wet concrete at his feet. Taehyung. Jungkook whispered it aloud. And the air shattered. He stood in the alley. But the mural was peeling. Beneath it, layers. Old posters. Older graffiti. Older still, scorched wood. And under it all, a circle. Not broken. Not open. Just absent. Like it had never been drawn. Someone had taken it. Or erased it so completely that even space forgot it existed. He ran. Back to the hospital. To Jin's room. Empty. Bed untouched. No sign of The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was surgical, clinical. A silence so complete it carved the world into separate pieces. Jungkook stood in it, breathing raggedly. The matchstick still burning down toward his fingers. And in front of him, Taehyung opened his eyes like someone gasping back into existence after drowning for a lifetime. The boy didn't speak. He simply looked at Jungkook, not with confusion or gratitude, but with deep, resounding hurt. The kind that has settled in for so long it no longer needs to scream. It just watches. Endlessly. Jungkook dropped the burnt matchstick, his voice barely audible. "I remembered you." Taehyung blinked slowly. His skin shimmered strangely under the flickering hospital lights, like static on a dying television screen. "You forgot me." It wasn't an accusation. It was a funeral bell. Jungkook stepped closer, but the space between them didn't close. It stretched. Warped. Taehyung stood in a space that wasn't part of the hospital room anymore. It was memory. It was absence. "I didn't mean to," Jungkook said. "But you did," Taehyung replied. And with that, the lights died. Everything was dark again. No hum. No buzz. The emergency generators didn't flicker. The silence returned, heavier than before. A second voice spoke from behind Jungkook. You weren't supposed to say his name. Jungkook turned. Jeon, or what was left of him. His eyes were cloudy, like frost over glass. His mouth moved, but the voice didn't match. It was disjointed, female and male at once, broken into syllables that didn't belong together. You took something back, Jeon said. Jungkook shook his head. I returned what was stolen. You don't understand, Jeon said. He was not taken. He was given. He was the anchor, the tether. When we erased him, we closed the gate. And now, Taehyung stepped out of the flickering distortion that separated his world from Jungkook's. Now it's open again. Jungkook backed up, eyes darting. We can fix it. We've done it before. Taehyung didn't smile. You didn't fix it. You just changed its name. Jeon collapsed suddenly, screaming. The sound ruptured through the room like glass shattering inside your lungs. Jungkook fell to his knees, hands over his ears. Blood trickled from his nose. The lights exploded overhead. And then Taehyung appeared. Not as a memory. Not as a ghost. Real. Solid. His shirt was burned. His eyes were sunken. But his presence hit like gravity. He rushed to Jungkook, pulling him up. She's using him. Taehyung's real, but she's still inside the seams. Watching. Waiting. Jungkook tried to speak, but the sound that came out was wrong. Like the syllables weren't allowed. She made him into a doorway, Taehyung said. Not just memory. Origin. Taehyung stood, backlit by the pulsing light of the rift behind him. You think I wanted this? That I wanted to be the one forgotten so you three could play gods? You volunteered, Taehyung snapped. I was 8. I thought we were playing a game. The walls screamed. Paint bled. The hallway outside folded inward, curling like burnt paper. Hospital beds levitated and turned into ash. Nurses froze in place, their mouths open in silent screams, their shadows moving independent of their bodies. She's waking up in full, Taehyung said. Jungkook faced Taehyung, finally stepping toward him without distortion. Then help us end her. Taehyung looked broken. How? You erased me. You killed the tether and now I'm the lock. If you want to shut her out forever. Don't say it, Taehyung whispered. You have to erase me again. No, Jungkook said. No, we're not doing that. You don't have a choice. Taehyung screamed. She's latching onto me. Through your memory. Through your guilt. I can feel her growing. If I stay, she spreads. If I go, she dies in the dark. Jeon staggered up behind them, blood dripping from his ears. He's right. He's the doorway now. Jungkook turned to Taehyung. There has to be another way. Taehyung's jaw was trembling. Even if there is, we don't have time to find it. The rift behind Taehyung widened. They could see the monastery now. The original one. Stone walls covered in names no longer spoken. A sea of shadows crawling up from below, each one bearing the face of someone they forgot. A grandmother, a teacher, a first love. All of them twisted, eyeless, weeping blood and black smoke. I'm scared, Taehyung whispered, and for the first time his voice was just a boy's voice again. Jungkook stepped forward and wrapped his arms around him. He held him like no one ever had, like he remembered. I'm sorry, he whispered into Taehyung's hair. I should have known. I should have asked. I should have remembered. Taehyung reached out and joined the embrace. You were always one of us. Jeon collapsed again. The rift now consumed half the room. Reality was fracturing. Taehyung's body began to glow. If you do this, Jungkook whispered, don't let her win. Don't let her turn this into another silence. Taehyung looked at them both and smiled. Then he stepped back into the light. And with one final word, his name whispered by all three at once, the world stitched closed. The rift disappeared. The light vanished. And silence returned. This time peaceful. This time whole. 3 days later, the hospital was intact. Jeon had survived but barely spoke. Taehyung existed like a ghost inside his own body, always watching corners like they might speak to him. Jungkook sat in a park, holding the final page of the notebook Taehyung had retrieved from the fire. It was blank until he bled on it. Then the words appeared. You can't forget what was never truly lost. Taehyung was not a sacrifice. He was the one who chose memory. He saved us. Let him be the last. Below the words, a symbol appeared. Not a circle, not a lock, but a mirror. And Jungkook, trembling, whispered, "Let us never forget again." Somewhere, unseen but felt, the house with the red door collapsed into dust. And Taehyung's name echoed not in pain, but in peace. Years later, the city barely remembered the strange fire that consumed a forgotten alleyway. The mural was gone. The red door never came back. Most people passed the corner without a glance. But every so often, someone would pause, brow furrowed, a flicker of recognition twitching behind their eyes, as if something was supposed to be there. In a quiet bookshop tucked between an abandoned cinema and a faux stall, there sat a single copy of a self-published book, left on the counter without price or title. The spine simply read, "Memory does not forget." Inside, names, stories, symbols. A boy with too many shadows. A boy with too much love. A boy who remembered when no one else dared to. The last page bore one sentence, scrawled in handwriting too neat for ink alone. You are not forgotten. Not anymore. And beneath that, Jin, Taehyung, Jungkook, and Taehyung, their circle didn't end. It evolved, not through blood, but through remembrance. And remembrance, real remembrance, is how gods, monsters, and boys become immortal.